Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. I didn't drop my fork. I didn't gasp. I didn't even blink. When she screamed at me across the table, I just stared at the flickering candle between us like it might whisper how I was supposed to feel. This wasn't the first time she embarrassed me in public, but it was the first time I didn't flinch. Earlier that day, I'd spent 38 minutes lint rolling my blazer. Not because it mattered to me, but because Lillian hated stray hairs. She called them social suicide. I used the lint roller on my pants, too, and even cleaned my phone screen, because she once said greasy smudges made me look uncooked. The restaurant was her choice. It always was. Some fusion place with menus that didn't have prices and lighting dim enough to hide bruised egos. I showed up 5 minutes early. She showed up 25 minutes late. Not unusual. What was unusual was how she didn't sit down right away. She stood there, scanning me like a TSA agent at a bad airport. "Are you wearing that?" she asked. I nodded. She exhaled dramatically. "Don't make a scene. Let's just eat." The first 20 minutes passed in silence, aside from her laughter whenever her phone buzzed. I asked her who it was, gently. She said, "No one you know." "Why?" Then, I reached across the table. Just a touch, just to remind her I was there. And that's when she did it. "Don't touch me. You look ridiculous." Everyone turned. Silverware clinked. Conversations paused, necks craned. She didn't care. She sipped her wine like nothing happened. I stood up slowly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam anything. I just said, "You're not worth this." And I walked out. But this isn't a story about a restaurant scene. It's a story about everything that led up to it, and everything that happened after. Because when I got home that night, something was waiting for me. And it shattered the one thing I thought I still had, doubt. When I got home that night, I didn't even take my shoes off. I just stood in the hallway, holding onto the doorknob like it was the only thing still grounding me to this version of my life. The version where I still believed maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe I'd embarrassed her. Maybe I really did look ridiculous. But the house was quiet, too quiet. No apology text. No missed call. Nothing. So I did what I never thought I'd do. I opened a drawer in our bedroom where Lillian always hid her second phone. She thought I didn't know about it. Thought I was too meek, too distracted, too spineless to ever look. But that night, I wasn't trying to be brave. I was just tired of wondering. The phone wasn't even locked. That surprised me more than anything. No fingerprint, no code. Just a blank home screen with a gallery folder titled #WorkEvents. My hands were shaking before I even tapped it. The first picture was of her smiling on a hotel balcony I'd never seen before. The second was a mirror selfie in lingerie I didn't recognize, captioned, "Not bad for a Monday." I kept scrolling. Different cities. Different outfits. Same man. Travis. The one from her office. The one she always said was annoying, too clingy. There was a video. I didn't want to watch it, but I tapped it anyway. I wish I could say it was blurry, or that it cut off, or that maybe it wasn't what it looked like. But it was exactly what it looked like. Her, in a hotel bed, recording herself while on a call. His voice in the background, telling her to smile for him. She laughed. She laughed in a way I hadn't heard in years. Not since before we got married. I sat down on the edge of our bed, still holding the phone like it might bite me. All I could think about was how carefully she'd wrapped my birthday gift last month. How she'd kissed me on the cheek and whispered, "You're my everything," while this was sitting in a folder one swipe away. It wasn't just betrayal. It was effort, planning, performance. That's what broke me. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Because I realized something far worse than being cheated on. I had become invisible. And invisible people do strange things when no one's watching. The next morning, I did something completely out of character. I cooked breakfast. Eggs, toast, fresh fruit, even squeezed oranges by hand like I was auditioning for a life I hadn't lived in years. I set everything on the table with matching plates, folded napkins, and 2 glasses. One for me, one for her. It wasn't forgiveness. It was bait. I needed to see her lie to my face. Needed to watch her try. Maybe that's pathetic, I don't know. But I didn't want to confront a ghost. I wanted to look the betrayal in the eye. She walked in around 9 a.m., like nothing happened, wearing the same dress from the restaurant. Hair perfectly messy in that effortless way that only someone full of secrets can pull off. She saw the food and smirked. "Guilt breakfast?" she said, laughing. I nodded and pulled out her chair. She didn't ask about last night. Not once. Just scrolled through her phone between bites and made passive comments about a coworker's outfit. as if I hadn't walked out on her mid-dinner. As if the words, "You're not worth this," hadn't echoed in front of 30 strangers. I waited until she was halfway through her toast to ask, "So, how's Travis?" Her fork stopped midair. It was less of a reaction and more of a calculation, like she was measuring how much I actually knew. She tilted her head and said, "He's fine." "Why?" I shrugged, just wondering what kind of team-building exercises your office does in hotel rooms. Silence. She didn't deny it, didn't panic. She just looked at me, blank, then stood up and said, "You went through my stuff?" That's when I realized something awful. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't scared. She was offended. Like I was the problem for peeking behind the curtain she'd been performing in front of for months. "You don't get to act like a victim," she said coldly. "You've been boring for years." Boring. That word hit harder than any insult ever could. Not cruel, not abusive, just boring. Like I was a piece of outdated furniture she was embarrassed to throw out in case someone asked questions. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just said, "Thanks for finally saying it out loud." And that's when the idea started forming. If I was boring, maybe it was time to become something else. By that afternoon, I couldn't look at her without seeing Travis's reflection in her phone screen. His voice, his hand on her waist, the way she called him T. Short and intimate like a nickname she'd earned through disloyalty. My name in her mouth sounded more like an obligation. I didn't yell. I didn't break anything. That wasn't my style. But I did something worse, something she never saw coming. I started smiling. She noticed. Of course she did. We were two people sharing the same house, but not the same life. She kept watching me like she was waiting for me to explode, to fall apart, to do something messy she could blame on my insecurity. But I didn't give her that. I cleaned. I whistled. I even asked if she needed her clothes dropped off at the dry cleaner. She tilted her head like a confused cat and said, "What's with the sudden helpful husband act?" I just smiled wider. That night, I messaged someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Riley, an old college friend. Someone who once confessed she had a crush on me back when I was already engaged to Lillian. We hadn't talked since my wedding, not even a happy birthday text. But she answered in minutes. She always had that instinct for emotional emergencies. "You okay?" she asked. "No," I replied. "But I'm finally awake." The next 2 days were a blur of secrets, mine this time. I found an old burner phone, the kind we used to keep in our glove box for emergencies. I installed a voice recorder app and left it in the kitchen under the fruit bowl. It didn't take long. On day 3, she brought Travis to the house. At my house. She told him I'd been checked out for years and said, "He's too soft to do anything about it anyway." Then she laughed. That laugh. It didn't even sound human anymore. And then Travis said something that turned my blood to ice. "When are you going to tell him about the savings account?" That was the moment everything inside me shattered and reformed all at once. Because I wasn't just being cheated on, I was being replaced, erased, and robbed. She was draining our joint account. Slowly, subtly. Small withdrawals that I hadn't noticed because they were under the threshold that triggered alerts. I checked the banking app that night with trembling fingers. She was good, but not good enough. By the time she went to bed, I'd already started moving my direct deposit to a new account in my name only. I also scheduled a meeting with a divorce attorney. And as I lay there beside her in the dark, pretending to sleep, I knew what I had to do next. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. Not really. I just laid there, next to the woman who had rehearsed an entire double life in the same room where we used to whisper dreams about having kids and building a deck. Lillian slept soundly, like guilt had no jurisdiction over her. Meanwhile, my thoughts were ricocheting off every decision I'd made in the last decade. Every time I ignored my gut, every excuse I accepted, every time I let her twist my doubt into silence. But not anymore, because now I had something stronger than suspicion. I had proof and a plan. I started small, changed all my passwords, rerouted my paycheck, backed up the audio recordings to an encrypted drive hidden in a file labeled Old Taxes. Then, I visited a lawyer named Bethany Allridge, recommended anonymously through a divorce forum I never thought I'd read, let alone post in. Bethany didn't smile. She didn't offer pity. She just said, "Tell me everything," and took notes like a surgeon preparing for an operation. I told her about the savings account, the affair, the lies, the emotional erosion, the public humiliation. She nodded, flipped through some forms, and said calmly, We'll start with freezing the joint accounts. Then we'll get your name off anything she's trying to leverage. That word, leverage, hit me like a freight train. Because I hadn't even realized that's what I had become to Lillian. Leverage for stability, for status, for appearances. And she was using me up quietly, hoping I'd never wake up. By the end of that week, my financial footprints were gone. I took photos of every important document and stored them digitally. I started sleeping in the guest room, blaming a bad back. Lillian didn't question it. She barely noticed. She was too busy texting in corners, walking outside to take a call, and deleting her browser history like a teenager trying to hide something from their parents. Except I wasn't the one being lied to anymore. I was the one watching her dig her own grave. Then came Friday. Her voice was unusually sweet that morning. She even offered to bring me coffee, which made me suspicious instantly. But I played along. She had plans that evening, she said. A girls' night, which I'd normally pretend to believe. But this time, I smiled and said, have fun. Because I already knew exactly where she was going. And I was going to be there first. Friday night was cold enough to sting your cheeks, but not cold enough to stop people from pretending their lives were still warm. I waited in my car across the street from a boutique hotel Lillian once swore she hated because it smelled like other people's affairs. The irony could have knocked me out. I saw her before she even entered the building. Red coat, hair straightened, phone glued to her hand. She didn't look around. She didn't check for me. Why would she? I was the harmless, boring husband who folded laundry and said, I trust you, even when she vanished for weekends. She walked in, confident, like she owned the place. 5 minutes later, Travis followed. Same jacket from the picture in her hidden folder. That was enough confirmation for me. But I wasn't there just to catch them. I was there to make it unforgettable. Inside the hotel lobby, I slipped the front desk clerk a 20 and asked if he could ring room 319. I told him I was her brother and had left something important. He didn't question it. When the phone rang, I watched from behind a column. She picked up, laughed, said something flirtatious. Then her face twisted like she smelled smoke. She turned toward the elevator, clearly uneasy. I didn't give her time to react. I walked out before she could come down. My job there was done. Back home, I pulled up our home security camera system, the one she thought was broken. One camera still worked. Just one. And it faced the front door. I watched her arrive at 1:47 a.m., her lipstick smudged, coat buttoned wrong. She looked drunk on adrenaline, on control. She tiptoed in, like I was asleep, and she was some sweet teenager sneaking back from curfew. I was sitting in the kitchen with the lights off. She didn't see me until she flicked hers on. Her gasp was theatrical. Jesus, Spencer. You scared me. I stared at her like she was a stranger who wandered into my life by mistake. I didn't yell. I didn't ask questions. I just said, you forgot your hotel receipt on the counter. Bold move, booking the same place twice in a row. Her face froze. The silence was so thick I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Then she rolled her eyes. Rolled. Her eyes. I'm not doing this right now, she muttered. And she wasn't wrong. She wasn't doing it right now. Because by that time, I'd already submitted the divorce paperwork. Lillian didn't know it yet, but every move she made now echoed in a courtroom I had already begun to build. The divorce attorney had drawn up the papers, and the bank account she'd been secretly draining had already been frozen. All I needed was one final moment of clarity, one last push to make sure there was no turning back. And she gave it to me, without hesitation. That Sunday, we were invited to a dinner party hosted by one of her colleagues. A polished event, small but upscale, with people who laughed too hard and drank like their marriages depended on it. I didn't want to go. God knows I didn't. But I went anyway, because I needed to witness what she looked like around other people when she thought she was winning. I needed to see the woman she was when she wasn't pretending to be my wife. We arrived late. She blamed me. She always did. She introduced me as Spencer, my better half, when he's not trying to fix the garbage disposal. I smiled. Everyone laughed. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came during dinner, when someone asked how we met. I told the story, a sweet, awkward memory of a bookstore and spilled coffee, and she interrupted with a snort. Oh my God, Spencer, you make it sound like a rom-com. You're so dramatic. Then she leaned over and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, don't touch me. You look ridiculous. And something in me just stopped. A gear locked. I stared at her, but I didn't see her anymore. I saw every humiliating moment she tucked behind fake smiles and social cues. Every time I told myself to be patient, to be understanding, to give her space. Every stupid, self-erasing compromise I made for the sake of a woman who didn't even think I was worth being kind to in public. So I stood up. Slowly, calmly. I adjusted my blazer, looked around at the guests now frozen with wide eyes and full mouths, and said, "You're right, Lillian. I do look ridiculous. I look ridiculous for staying married to someone who cheats, lies, steals from our account, and thinks no one's noticed." You could hear a fork hit a plate. Someone actually gasped. "I'll send the divorce papers to your work email," I added, then looked at the host. "Thanks for dinner." And I walked out. Not rushed. Not shaken. I didn't even look back. That was the night her fake world cracked in front of people she wanted to impress the most. And it was only the beginning of her public unraveling. She tried calling me 37 times that night. Left voicemails that sounded like monologues from a crumbling stage play. Apologies that were more about embarrassment than remorse. The next morning, she showed up at the house. I didn't answer the door. I didn't need to. She stood outside for 10 minutes pretending she hadn't blown up her own life. Then she left, her heels clicking on the concrete like punctuation marks at the end of a failed performance. The divorce went smoothly, on my end, anyway. The evidence I had collected was so solid that even her lawyer didn't put up much of a fight. She tried to play the sympathy card. Said I blindsided her. Said I should have talked to her before making everything so dramatic. I smiled during mediation and said, "You already talked loud enough for everyone, Lillian." I just finally answered back. I kept the house. I kept my car. I even kept most of the joint assets, since she had been siphoning funds behind my back. And her little secret account? It's frozen now. Turns out courts don't love financial betrayal, especially when it's documented in 4K. A few weeks later, I got a letter. Handwritten. She said she missed me. Said she never realized how much I actually did until I stopped doing it. She asked if we could talk. I didn't respond. Instead, I took myself out to dinner. Same place where she once screamed at me for touching her hand. The hostess remembered me. I told her this time it was just a party of one, and I asked for the same table. Halfway through the meal, a man at the next table looked over and asked what I was celebrating. I didn't hesitate. "Freedom," I said, "and self-respect. I've spent so many years convincing myself that being quiet made me strong. That patience was noble. But the truth is, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stand up, say enough, and walk away without explaining a thing." To anyone going through something similar, you're not weak for hoping they'll change. But don't wait forever. People like that, people who mock you, lie to you, make you feel invisible, they don't deserve front row seats to your life. So here I am now, living smaller maybe, but breathing deeper, sleeping better, and finally hearing my own voice again. Thank you for being here. You've been watching Reddit Confessions. If you've ever had to walk away from someone who didn't see your worth, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Or tell us about a powerful turning point from history that still inspires you. We read everything, and we're listening.